Welcome back, folks. I'm Frizz, and today I'd like to take some time to talk about something incredibly subjective. What makes martial characters cool, and do spellcasters not have whatever that is? I'm not necessarily talking about what makes playing a martial fun, or even what makes playing a martial mechanically effective, but rather, what makes them fucking rad as hell. See, I'm of the opinion that every character easily has the potential to be cool, but the way that people approach playing spellcasters or describe casting spells can get in the way of that. Yeah, obviously, the mechanics are important in regards to how cool a character actually is, but how they're framed within the game is just about as important. To start off with, let's talk about what martial characters do right. I think that a lot of this comes down to something really simple. It's really easy to come up with cool ways to describe physical activities. Oh, you just crit someone with a greatsword? It's pretty easy to come up with a badass way to describe that. Did someone just jump 30 feet from a standstill? Cool, that's about 3 times the current real-world record. Your rogue just picked a complicated lock in a single round? Just open up the Lockpicking Lawyer's YouTube channel to get some reference material for describing that. Basically, a lot of physical activities are really easy to describe because they're easy to imagine because they're physical, which makes it way easier to describe how cool the people doing that activity are. Of course, martials aren't completely immune to being framed as incompetent or uncool for messing up. There's been an unfortunate tendency for people to describe attacks where you roll a 1 as using an over-the-top amount of slapstick comedy for years outside of 2E. And while it hasn't been nearly as bad in 2E, characters having a 5% chance of making a fool of themselves on any given attack is still a bit of a possibility, as long as that's how you describe a critical failure. Of course, I think that you can describe a critical failure in a lot of ways that make the character who is failing not seem like an absolute fool. As an example, you could describe a critical failure as your opponent doing something cool themselves, like shoulder checking you to knock you off balance because you choreographed or just show that you were winding up for a super obvious attack. So they knocked you off balance and messed up your attack, rather than you tripping over your own feet. Rather than just swinging at air like you're incompetent, you make a mistake and then your opponent capitalizes it in a cool way. It doesn't make you seem less cool. It just, takes advantage of you messing up to make your opponent seem cool. Alright then, so let's talk about spellcasters. The first and most important thing in my mind is to set reasonable expectations. Wizards and other spellcasters are not rulers of reality who twist the world to do whatever form they want in 2E. If you're expecting to describe wizards like that, because wizards and a lot of spellcasters were just really strong in previous editions of D&D and Pathfinder, you're gonna be a bit disappointed. Unless you're playing at level 15 or something, spellcasters aren't nearly as powerful as they have been in previous editions. And even if you are above level 15 or something, you're going to be dealing with creatures and threats that you can't just magic out of existence. That being said, it isn't fair or reasonable to expect that magic just isn't going to be cool and just say that that's the end of it. As an example, let's take the example that I gave earlier about how you can describe critically failing a strike in a way that doesn't make the striker look lame. Rather than showing it as a huge fumble, it can instead be a small mistake that then the opponent capitalizes on really well. So critically failing on a spell attack roll could be described as the spell being slightly more telegraphed than normal, allowing your opponent to dodge wider. Or it could be that the spell reacts to the environment and a little bit to throw off the aim, making your opponent's dodge a little bit more effective. Basically, a critical failure doesn't have to be described as a personal critical failure, but just a bad outcome that's the result of a small mistake and your opponent just being good. On top of that, I think that buffs, debuffs, and spells that use saving throws all suffer more from this than attack roll spells, because a lot of what you can use to make martials seem cool, you can apply pretty easily to spell attack roll spells. Shooting someone with an arrow is pretty impressive, and you can take a lot of that, and what makes that impressive, and just take it to hitting someone with a bolt of fire instead. Often, I've had people describe creatures completely ignoring spells if they got a critical success on their saving throw, which can make the action spent casting that spell feel like they were kind of wasted. As a general rule, I think that if someone critically succeeds on a saving throw against a given spell, effort should be spent making that person look cool, but it should also be spent to show just how dangerous that spell was and impressive that they were able to completely shrug it off. If someone shakes off a Dominate spell with concentrated effort, that makes the Dominate seem way cooler than if, they just didn't interrupt at all what they were doing. Doing some crazy over-the-top acrobatics to dodge a lightning bolt makes the lightning bolt seem way cooler, if you actually describe how powerful the lightning bolt is. To boil it down, make spells seem cool and powerful even if they don't do anything mechanically, like, someone critically succeeded on their saving throw. Also, for some spells, an easy way to make them seem cool, and really, really cool, is to describe how they impact the environment. It can really suck if you miss with your Disintegrate and don't deal any damage, but it makes your wizard seem way cooler if the massive damage that Disintegrate deals to the environment is described. You didn't do damage to the person you're fighting, but you did put a hole through 3 houses. If everyone saves against your Fireball spell, it's still pretty damn important to describe the scorch marks covering every surface. The environment is an excellent canvas to show off how powerful certain spells are, and you should use it. After all, there isn't often... So yeah, there's a couple things holding spellcasters back from being as cool as I think that they should be, and in reality, actually are. People set their hopes a bit too high and let their disappointment color their descriptions, or they just breeze past spells that don't do anything, rather than showing how powerful they potentially could have been. There certainly are problems with mechanics that absolutely shouldn't be ignored, but I think that not paying attention to the way that casting spells are framed within games is a little bit silly, because absolutely how a spell or ability is framed is really, really important. Thanks for watching. I've gotta say, I'm looking forward to people's reactions to this one. What are your thoughts regarding framing characters as being competent or cool, even when they're not actually doing anything mechanically? Let me know in a comment down below, and while you're down there, you can always consider subscribing or joining the channel as a member to support me financially. Any and all support I get means a lot to me, and being a member lets you brag about supporting a stick figure to all of your friends. Regardless, until I see you next, live a wonderful life.